great. But tonight is especially meaningful for me because our guest speaker is not only an award-winning chef, but she's my friend. So I'm thrilled to have a friend. When Tom and I first moved here, and a lot of you have heard this story, but this was a sort of a late career move for him, and I had been in Alabama my whole life, and so a move out of state, even though it was just next door, was challenging. And I thought, you know, I can choose to be afraid and nervous about it, or I can embrace this as a big adventure, and so that's what we chose to do. And our first stop, after we got everything settled into the house, we made a trip to here, to the Historic Society. And as luck would have it, the docent that day was Lynn Horton. So I'm going to get emotional because I'm so glad you guys are here tonight. We've missed you a lot. But anyway, Lynn can walk you through this museum, and it's not rehearsed. I mean, she knows every room and every element here. And it made such an impression on me, and I thought, well, you know, I just want to jump in with both feet and get to know my new hometown. So the second stop was watching these beautiful buildings come up out of the ground on Barn Street and that pretty white brick. And I thought, oh man, that's a new restaurant. And I took a big turn from my career path from Alabama and decided to take a chance. And I walked in and was interviewed by Jim, who I'll introduce in a little bit, and they decided to say yes. And so they brought me on as a hostess, and I mean, I thought, how hard can it be, right? You just greet and seat. Wrong. There's a little more to it than that, I found out. But it was a fabulous, fabulous experience, and I'd still be doing it today, except I got a couple of bum feet, so I had to walk away from that. But I found out that certainly this restaurant, the members of the staff were family. And I mean, when you're there 12 and 14-hour days, you know, you find a way to bond, and you do it pretty quickly. And they embraced me and made me a part of the family, and it just was a lovely experience. So the first thing I learned from Chef was that you don't walk on the cook line, unless you're supposed to be there. But also I found out that a passion for your craft and enthusiasm goes a long way. It's very contagious. And so it was a joy to be able to learn from her and to understand how the dishes begin and what the elements are in each one. And so I want you to feel that same enthusiasm. So tonight we're going to do things a little differently. Obviously this museum was a home first. So we're going to pretend like we're in our living room and we're just having a chat. And I'm going to invite Chef Hilary to come up and join me, and we're just going to talk a little bit. So please, everyone, give a warm welcome to Chef Hilary. Can you see us okay back there if we sit?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Well, first of all, thanks again for coming. I appreciate it. I know, of course, a little bit about your story, but I just felt like it was important that the folks in town get to know you a little bit too. I know that you grew up in Ohio. So can you kind of tell us at what point you felt like, okay, cooking is a little more than a hobby? I want it to be my vocation.
Vocation. Thank you so much for having me and spending the time this evening. Yeah, I did, right out of high school, I was fortunate enough to do some traveling. I knew that sitting, behind the desk for how many ever more years was not going to happen. It wasn't appropriate. It's not for everybody. So I did some traveling and just started coming into different cultures and growing up with such a wonderful food background. I had very high standards for produce because, the summer started with picking peas and strawberries. My first job was picking strawberries. I'll never forget the lady scolding us for picking the unripe strawberries. And as a chef, like, unripe strawberries are a no-go. So that was a long time ago we learned that. But I've been just traveling, tasting, seeing how food is a part of everybody's lives. It's not just necessity. But that's, I was like, this is probably something to pursue. I came home one weekend, and I said to my mom, I want to go to culinary school. And there's this culinary school in New York. And she's like, okay, well, let's pick out a weekend, and we're going to drive up there. And we drove all the way to Hyde Park, New York. And I had Martha Stewart magazine. And on the front was Martha Stewart with this big basket of apples, picking apples. And she was in the Hudson Valley. And I was like, Mom, I know we're here to go to school, but we've got to find this orchard. Look, and we grew up with amazing apples, but what did we do? We drove right on past that culinary school to go to this orchard, Breezy Hill Orchard. My husband and I were in New York just a couple of years ago at the Green Market in Union Square. Breezy Hill Orchards, right there, 30 years later. Well, yeah, I just said it, probably 30 years later. Sure enough, there it was. So once again, it always seems to go back to produce, and you know, we never, there it was. But so we went back and we visited the school, and I said, okay, this is it.
That's fantastic. So, I mean, what's the process of getting into the Culinary Institute?
So then it was much more stringent, very expensive. It's also known as the CIA, so Culinary Institute of America, Hyde Park, New York. It was actually created and opened in 1946 to welcome the veterans back, to hopefully provide them with a skill. And it's right on the Hudson. It's amazing. It was a monastery, and so these massive buildings, and you know, these dorms overlook the Hudson River. It's stunningly beautiful. And the school was created mostly old world chefs, you know, chefs from Germany and Austria. Most of my chefs were probably, you know, definitely not working in kitchens anymore, but, you know, retired in a way. But I was like, man, there's no way I'm retiring teaching. These guys were tough, like tough. I mean, we were in class at 7:30 in the morning. You weren't getting out till 9 o'clock at night. There were days that, you know, there's operating restaurants at the school. And it was just brutal. We'd go to 2:30 in the afternoon, 2:30 at night, still be polishing silverware and have 2 more hours to go. And it was just, it's not what culinary school is today. It was fairly brutal. But I am definitely the chef I am today because of it.
So what was the ratio for male and female?
So our classes were 18 students in the class, and to play there was 1 or 2 girls per 18. That has completely, totally flipped now. But it was just, there was one female instructor at school. Her name was Lyde Butchton Kirk. And we have to do front of the house duties and chores as well. And she was actually at a chef's table eating, and it was myself and another. We had to serve them. So, you know, God help us all. We put all these cooks, you know, out in these front of the house positions. So we're trying to put plates in front of people. I put a plate in front of her, and she said, "Thank you." And I said, "Yes, ma'am."
Oh.
The single worst mistake of my life. Like, everyone knows that Darth Vader grip in the Star Wars movies. Like, I literally felt her hands around my throat. She stood up from the table, and she was stout. She really was. And she was old school, like, I think she's passed away actually, but she was just massive, and she stood up and she's like, "You need to come over with me." And I was just like, that's so not good. I'm so getting kicked out of school right now. All I could think was, what do you mean you got kicked out of school? You know, I was horrified. And she's like, "Don't ever call a female chef ma'am." She goes, you will understand this. You will live this the rest of your life. And she is 100% correct, because I have lived it my entire career. I am constantly overlooked. I will be in a kitchen as the executive chef with a fancy white coat that I did not wear tonight. And a delivery will come in, and they will go to somebody that doesn't even speak English, as opposed to having to talk to me to make a simple delivery. I have been paid less than my fellow male counterparts. I work twice as hard. I run a kitchen just as good, twice as clean. I will work longer and harder than everyone, but that statistic, it's kind of a nasty one. But once again, our industry is changing a lot. There are women chefs everywhere. There are girls in culinary school left and right. The majority, I want to say, I try to keep the kitchens fairly balanced as far as girls and boys. You know, just trying to keep everyone in sync and kind of balanced. But when I was at school, it was definitely male dominated, and she was 100% right. And so when people address me as, you know, yes chef, yes ma'am, it's very difficult here in the South, because everyone here has such wonderful manners. But yes ma'am gets turned into yes chef pretty quick. And it's just out of respect.
Absolutely. Well, obviously you made it through CIA. So once you graduated, what was the next step?
So it was either A or B, Atlanta or Boston. I thought Boston was pretty cool, being up there in the Northeast. But being from Ohio, it just so happened that those couple of years in Boston, like one Saturday night, they got 6 feet of snow. And I was like, no way. Like to have to dig out and like walk to work, and no way I'm not doing this. And then I'm like, Atlanta's got to be a little bit better. And the Olympics are slated for '96. So I was like, they got to have it together. Like, that's got to be safe, right? And it's not so far south. It's got to be pretty nice. And then the only thing I can think is, they have a moderate climate. There's got to be amazing farms there. Like, they got to have stuff all year around. Back then, when I got here to Atlanta, I went to my first farmer's market, and there was like some wilted kale on the table. And I was like, are you kidding me? What is going on here? But that has all come full circle, as well as we have our own farmers market here.
I know.
Like with farmers, and there's farms all over the place. So.
Fantastic. And I know your dedication to fresh and local.
Yes.
Whenever possible. So you come to Atlanta, you end up with the Buckhead Life Group.
Buckhead Life Restaurant Group. I took recommendations from chefs at school, found my way to Atlanta, and found my way into Buckhead Life Restaurant Group, which at that time in Atlanta, I think there were like 11 restaurants and continuing to grow. So I thought, well, if they're continuing to grow, this is probably, to get in at the ground level, to be able to move up very quickly. I saw opportunity. The concepts were all very different. There's Southwest, there was 2 Italian concepts, there was a bakery, there was the Atlanta Fish Market had just opened with a big fish out front. And I thought this was probably a good place to continue the education. And that I did at Buckhead Life. Before I went to work in the morning, I'd go stop at Preachy, talked with the pastry chef, worked with the nice little Hispanic girls that were making the fresh pasta. On my way home at night, I would stop by the Buckhead Bread Company because the garage doors were up because they were pulling all the bread out of the oven. So I'd work with the bakers, get the bread out of the oven, otherwise known as a free baguette on the way home. I went to the fish market to learn how to butcher fish. So by the time I became a sous chef at 103 West, moving my way up, to butcher 400 pounds of fish in a week, no problem. Because as a line cook, I was using that opportunity, to continue the education. So,
Well, obviously.
Question.
Sure.
So you said you went to these different stores, or whatever you call them, of the organization to learn things. Were you actually working at these different?
No, that was just on my own time.
On your own time?
On my own time. So being very dedicated to the restaurant, I was employed at 103 West, where eventually I became the executive chef. But as I was employed there as a line cook, working 40 hours a week, there's still plenty of time to learn. So being dedicated to that one individual restaurant, learning what I could there, but knowing that, I would say to the executive chef at the time, do you mind, do you think you can make a phone call? Can I stop by the bakery? And he's like, why don't you just go and do your own introduction? I was like, okay, thanks, chef. Let me go learn the bakers, which is great because as I grew up within this corporation, by the time I became a sous chef and an executive chef, at that time, I already known people for 4 or 5 years. So, at the point of transitioning into a sous chef, who's an assistant to the chef, and then becoming the executive chef. And I beat a statistic, when you graduate from the CIA, you should be at the upper level management within 5 years, and I did it in 4. So it's 29 years old being an executive chef of a multi-million-dollar restaurant right smack dab in the middle of Buckhead. And then the government cut spending for corporations. And things got ugly. Not like this last recession, clearly, but we had Lockheed, we had, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola probably spent $50,000 with us a year entertaining. These were massive budgets, massive amounts of money. And then Bill Clinton, I think, was president, and he cut a lot of the corporate spending, and all of a sudden, business just went from here to nothing. Then, if you also know anything about Atlanta, Orlando and Las Vegas both built new convention centers. We lost the majority of our convention business, and that was a huge, the Gold Club went out of business. That was a huge hit for Atlanta, right? Thank God they built more runways because that brought the business back to Atlanta, but we've never had our convention business back. That personally affected me. I was an hourly employee. When you go from 40 hours down to 28 hours, all of a sudden you have to really, gas money, get to and from work, rent, roof over the head, you really had to, we really had to pay attention. At that point, 103 West was a very high-end fine dining restaurant. We also did catering on the weekends, bar mitzvahs, social type events, and that all quickly changed as well. But catering sales manager came to me one day and said, would you consider doing just banquets here? And I'm like, you mean like a hotel without rooms? And she's like, yeah, think about it. And I said, well, you would take out all the variables. So the concept at 103 West while I was there actually changed to then just a banquet facility. Very profitable, great for the corporation. Told the corporation at that point, I'm only going to be here a short period of time. This is not what I signed up for. And I was there for like 7 more years.
And it was very successful.
It was very successful. And once again, for us to execute banquets, we have a lovely private dining facility at the Bistro. So we have constant, when we have banquets, they're executed very well because clearly that part of my background comes to fruition.
This has nothing to do with a lot, but years ago, I can't remember what year it was, my husband and I went to 103 West to celebrate our anniversary, and I had ostrich.
Oh yeah, there was a lady in South Georgia
amazing.
that raised that for us. She drove up from South Georgia, and ostrich it's red meat. It's 40% leaner than chicken. It is delicious because it tastes like red meat. It's probably there.
Yeah.
Right, she drove a Buick. She raised ostrich, and it was, I was like, is there a fillet in an ostrich? Or I'm like, what? Ostrich, dude, what's the cut? Didn't even matter. She just brought it, and I was like, okay, great. No, we had a huge following because of the ostrich. We had a lot of heart patients, heart disease, because they wanted lean, but how much chicken can you eat? And the other white meat, come on, that's dry. We had a huge ostrich following. That's great.
Cool.
People actually, not so much, but even when Jim and I were in the city years ago, people were like, I was just at 103 West, I had the tuna and the da-da-da. I'm like, oh yeah, and I'm thinking, that was so long ago. But by you saying ostrich, you put in a very specific time frame. That's great.
Well, I know when you were at 103, you had to do a lot of demonstrations. So you honed your skill. We'd love for you to do one for us tonight.
Thanks. And Beth is correct. Being at 103 and being the only female chef in the corporation of chefs, we had a PR department. And this was the time when, being a chef was like super cool, and the TV Food Network was just getting started. Like when I was at culinary school, there were kids coming up and they're like, there's going to be a network, and it's just going to be about cooking. And I was like, wait, and then all of a sudden now we have these concept grocery stores and everything that's on the television. But there was definitely, it was magazine and it was print. So, Chef Bobby at the fish market, oh, here's pretty Chef Hilary, she rides a Harley, so there was a lot of demonstrations to be done. But this demonstration that I chose tonight is kind of multifaceted in the way that it's something that we learned at culinary school. So I'm going to demonstrate tonight a very simple mayonnaise. Making it from scratch. You can do it by hand, you can do it with a little machine. And I thought this would be great for tonight because I brought kind of some snacks tonight, and something from every element of my career. So the demonstration being from the 103 West era, but demoing mayonnaise because it's a basic fundamental of cooking, and it's something we learned at school, and we were judged and tested on, and I did pretty good at it. But the mayonnaise is a component of the tomato mayonnaise sandwich that I brought for you to taste this evening, because that was something very, very popular at the Hill, because we did and do at the Bistro and Jimmy's. We did all our own baking, so to have fresh bread out of the oven and a nice smear of mayonnaise and a great, very well, nice hybrid, perfectly grown tomato. So for the mayonnaise demonstration, very simple ingredients. Mayonnaise is an emulsion, so essentially, egg and oil binding together, the protein strands binding together to make something very thick and creamy that we all enjoy. Now my sous chef, actually Chef Morgan, who's the chef at Jimmy's, was like, Chef, really? Mayonnaise demo? She says, you're here in the South. And I just take some dukes and put it on the table. I was like, she's really witty. I was like, okay, I see how it is. I said, well, everyone, you know, this is one of the things I used to make, and everyone would kind of stand off to the edge. Really? And they're like, yes, chef, it's the best ever. Now, we have a farm that raises chickens and does our eggs for us. So we prefer farm eggs, but where food is today, you have a pasteurized egg. So the risk of salmonella is totally gone. We had a nice visit from the health department today at Bistro, and we got a 97, and they were so, thank you. They were so pleased to see the pasteurized eggs because it makes it easy for them. So, I think this tastes better. So we're gonna use All right, so we're gonna put the egg in. So once again, eggs and oil, it's an emulsion. And then we're gonna add in our seasonings. So this thing's a little noisy, but you need to blend it really well. As we know, the fat is in the yolk and the protein is very much in the white. So this is canola oil, just plain old simple canola oil, neutral flavor. And there's holes in the top, so I'm just going to put it in. You're going to drizzle it in very slowly. And by drizzling it in slowly, once again, the emulsion starts to form. And you'll see that it's starting to get thick and creamy already. And the standard ratio for 1 egg is 8 ounces of oil to achieve proper. So can everyone see that? Like, can you believe that? Isn't that fascinating? Okay, so salt and pepper. Salt isn't oil soluble, so in order to get the flavor, the seasoning in it, you have to season early on. So we use kosher salt, and for 1 egg, I usually do about 1.5 teaspoons. Seems like a lot, but it's kosher salt. A little bit of white pepper, typically a pinch of white pepper. And because we've already achieved for the most part the emulsion, I'm going to add in a little bit of vinegar. That's flavor. Vinegar is an acid, so if you put the acid in too early, it will be difficult for the emulsion to happen. You can actually what would be considered break the mayonnaise, which means it would separate.
Which type of vinegar is it?
I just use white vinegar for this. Yeah, plain old distilled white vinegar. Okay, for the tomato sandwiches, I like the mayonnaise, like nice and thick. So just continue to add the oil until I get the desired consistency.
Other than color, what's the difference between the white and the black pepper?
White pepper, they're two totally different, they're of the same species, but they just have, like there's red peppercorns, black, green, and the white. The white is just, it's appropriate for certain things, as opposed to black. I think the white is much stronger. Like you would never use white pepper in a pepper mill to grind because it's very pungent. But in certain things like mayonnaise or to season fish appropriately, we like the white pepper. And then so to finish, you can see the consistency is much thicker. So more oil, the thicker it's going to be because you're dealing with water and oil here at this point. So if I would put some water in it, it would become thin. But I'm going to continue on. Once again, I like that juice consistency. I also brought a little bit of paprika, kind of, once again, the white pepper and the paprika, just for the seasoning element of it. So this was actually 1.5 cups of oil, so we're going to finish it out. And what you can see then is just really nice, thick mayonnaise. I have a spoon. Beth, you want to give a taste?
Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's my seasoning pitch. Right?
I'll take that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's awesome. So, as a treat tonight, we've got some mager sandwiches. I'll have my trusty assistants for you.
It's a vegan.
She made me mayo with her eggs.
We had our baguettes come out, and our baguettes actually have no dairy or eggs. So for the
But I will say that
plant-based,
was probably a happy chicken egg.
that was super happy,
Those chickens
super
are
happy.
living the chicken dream.
Definitely. So once again, the tomato mayonnaise sandwiches, something that was just, as soon as the tomatoes hit, but they have to be right on. They have to have a good acidity to them. As soon as the tomatoes would hit, we would have to make these tomato mayonnaise sandwiches, and oh, they were so stinking popular. We've done them for our most recent, we've started a summer club, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. So it's just literally this is the same dough that we use if anyone has enjoyed our burger. Do we use it over at well, if you've had the chicken parm sandwich at Jimmy's, this is the same bread. We just make little loaves. And I only have so many loaf pans, so every day at the Hill when we had these sandwiches on, they would sell out so quickly. And you know me, I'm not going to the store and buy another pan. This is what we have tonight, this is what we have. Everyone has to just make it work.
Give us 2 shakes and we'll get them out to you. I can just say quickly that we have Erin, who is the
Pastry
pastry
chef.
chef, and then Gail, who is the bread maker and is my hero.
Yes, Gail's been with us. She started with us at the Hill, so she's
13 years, 1 month.
yeah.
We hired in July '07.
And Erin is our pastry chef. She started with no experience. She went to culinary school. She's 7 years. Morgan, who's the chef at Jimmy's, is 9 years. Yeah, it's a really long time. Adam is 4 years. There's just longevity within the restaurant. Just trying to create that family type environment, but just trying to attract people who comprehend or who are trainable in the way of just having respect for ourselves, for our industry, for each other, for the equipment. And we've done a really good job of attracting people.
So Chef, once you were there, I don't know what, about 3 years at 103, and when did you step up to executive chef?
Executive chef, I was there a total of 13 years, so it would have been 11 years as executive chef there. And then from 103 West, I joined an organization called La Danse Graffier, and that's an international women's culinary professional organization. We are an organization that loves to raise money for scholarships and promote women within the industry. And I was at a dinner one evening, and a friend of mine said, hey, there's this place called Serenity, and they're going to have a farm, and they're looking for like a restaurateur to have a restaurant. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And I was like, farm? You got to remember, this is, that farm to table situation, that wasn't even on the horizon. No one even knew that catchphrase, farm to table. So, is it a good sandwich?
This is delicious. It's fabulous.
It's so stinking
Those
simple.
tomatoes are amazing. So mayonnaise is good.
So just out of the blue one day, the developer of Serenity gave me a call and said, I have some restaurant space, would you be interested? And I said, well, sure. I went down, looked at the space, saw that there was a farm in the process of being started, met the farmer, her name was Paige Witherington, and I was like, I went home and I said, Jim, you need to pack the bags, and you need to quit your job, because we're gonna go have a restaurant. And that's what we did. And it was pretty scary, because we opened in August 07, and then we all know what happened in 08. And there is no reason we should have made it through, or the economy that we all went through. We just had, when gas went over $4, and there wasn't even gas available. Like literally, I sat everyone down. We sat everyone down. We said, we'll figure out how to get here, because we're gonna stick it. We're gonna stick this out. We're gonna stay together. We're gonna cook. We're gonna get people in this restaurant. You're gonna get tips, and we're gonna make it. And we did. We really, I had someone in the kitchen that got to school, one less mouth to feed. Someone else, I think, moved away as well, and we just got lean and mean. Jim was the bartender. If we were open, I was cooking. There was no question about that. We just had a very small staff. Mom was at the door, and we made it. And it became a successful restaurant.
Well, I want to take just a little break. You mentioned Mom. Sandy, would you wave your hand?
I don't forget Sandy.
Well, this is Sandy Pitch. She is Chef's mom, and I want to kind of go back for just a minute because I know just hearing Chef talk about her time at CIA and the hours, and you hear the hours, and then to take her own initiative to, once she got to 103, to start hitting all the restaurants and learning and just constantly learning. That speaks to a really strong work ethic. And so work ethic comes from Mom and Dad. So I want to say thank you to Mom and
Thanks, Mom.
yeah, because I mean that means she was raised well. Chef obviously does not do this by herself. She has a loving partner in her husband Jim. So I wanted to bring Jim up for just a minute and just sort of add whatever you want to the conversation, Jim.
Oh my goodness. You're in trouble now.
Well, we know he's good at numbers and years.
Kinda. So first, when she says 40 hours, she's lying. When she was working, she worked 16-hour days when she was starting off at 103 West, and they did not pay her for that. So
But I chose to do that.
that's right. So
I chose to do it.
she worked many hours. A lot of my friends and coworkers back then, what, are you really married? We've never seen your wife. I'm married.
And at 103 West, my staff thought the gentleman who did our coffee, Jay Martinez, who does our coffee for us at the Bistro, they thought he was my husband. Right? Because, you know, hi John, how you doing? Yes, how's it going? He came in for special events, and then one day Jim showed up, and they're like, who's this guy? And I was like, this is my husband. And they're like, the coffee guy? Not your husband. I'm like, no, the coffee guy's not my husband.
I don't know what else I can add.
Where did you all meet?
Okay, so, back in Ohio, so my brother and Sandy used to run a restaurant back in Ohio.
Runs in the blood.
So, my brother decided that he wanted to help me find a girlfriend. So he was always, hey, what about her? What about her? I'm like, would you leave me alone? No, no, no. One day, what about her? It's like, no. And then all of a sudden, he called me, who knows, months later and said, there's this girl, she's looking to buy this car. Will you look at her car for her? I said, sure. So she brought over that red Buick Skylark. And she really wanted it, and it was terrible. And her best friend, Dad, owned the dealership, and he was trying to sell it to her. Anyways, that's how we met. So she came over to my apartment. I looked at the car, told her she shouldn't buy it, and asked her out on a date. And
Bought you instead.
27 years later, we're talking to you.
That's it.
So,
That's it.
but yeah, so that's how we met. My brother, we thanked him at our wedding. So I told him how he always felt he screwed up everything. I said, you at least got one thing right. So, but we've, I don't know how we've managed to work together. Sandy, we're just the best of family and friends. I don't know how we've done it. We just have all these years. It just works. And I really couldn't imagine doing anything else right now. Or even down the road. We've just, it's just always worked for us. And I've been blessed to have these two lovely ladies in my life. Not that I don't have a bunch of them back in Ohio, but I have 5 sisters in Ohio. So, anyways, so it's a pleasure. A lot of people were surprised. There's still comedy value when people say, "Oh, you're married to a chef?" Because a lot of people don't expect us to still be working together. Now, of course, we don't really see each other much anymore. For some reason, we decided we'd open a second restaurant. I really don't know what's wrong with us, but that's what we did. So we just love it. Actually, I know why we opened a restaurant. We opened a restaurant the second